So next I want to talk about hover. How many people like hover on websites? Few people. Yeah. Hover is like, I don't know, yeah, it works awesome on the phone. It's like the Swiss Army knife that people keep in their back, like their back pocket, when they're like, oh, our UI got like really complicated. What can we do about that? Well, let's just like hide a bunch of stuff. And then when somebody moves their mouse, we'll show a bunch of stuff. Right? Like, that totally makes sense, except that I can't hover. So that really sucks for me. And it sucks if you're using a mobile device. But since this talk is about me, it sucks for me. Psh. So watch out for hovers. Like, you shouldn't ever be hiding functionality with a hover, because if you can't use a mouse, then you can't hover, and then you can't use that stuff. Right? So patterns like this are really bad, where you have a bunch of controls that you're hiding, and then you're showing on hover. Because unless you can hover, you're never going to see that stuff. Right? So what can you do? Well, the easiest thing is just to also show it on focus. So anything that you're showing on hover, just also show on focus. And then you can get to it. It still doesn't make me a big fan of that, but at least I can get to it. And so we go back over to the browser here. I think I had the Twitter open earlier, yeah? So Twitter, I'm actually going to show you, has hovers, right? Where they're showing all of the various things that you can do with tweets. And they probably had that very same conversation about like, wow, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do with tweets. It's going to be really, really messy if we do that. Maybe we should just hide it and we'll just show it on hover. I'll say, well, okay, that's all right, I guess. But the cool thing is that they actually also show it on focus. And so I can tab through, and as I'm tabbing through all these, and it moves to the next one, it actually shows all of those links as well. Right? And that's really cool, because it's basically, okay, so we're getting the same functionality even though I'm not using a mouse. Very much appreciated. Really good way to do things. It's just when you have stuff that's showing on hover, just also show it on focus. And then I can tab through it and use it just like anybody else. Okay, so just to wrap up on hover, don't rely on hover to show important details or functionality. It's really not a good way to go. It usually means that what you're doing is too complicated. Whenever you do use hover, also use focus. It's just a good general rule to have, that whenever you do :hover, also do :focus. It will help you out in immeasurable ways. Yes, good one as well. So what John just said is if you're using on mouse over and on mouse out in your JavaScript, then you should also do on focus and on blur in your JavaScript for the same effect, right? To make sure that when those things get focus, then they'll show the same things or have the same behaviors. Thank you, sir. All right, dialogs. How do we make dialogs accessible? That's really hard. Oh my God. Really all you have to do is not lose focus. That's the key to accessible dialogs, is don't lose track of the focus. And so I want to show you some examples of dialogs. Oh, let's not do that. Let's do it the easy way this time, shall we? Okay. So we'll go back to the Twitter here, and we'll check in on John and see what he's doing. So John is an Emmy Award-winning engineer. I saw him on the RSVP list, and this was all going to work out really well. And that's what he gets for not showing up. Okay, so we popped up this dialog now, and I'm just going to keep pressing tab. And where am I? Where is my tab? Can anybody see where the tab is? Yeah, it's right here. Under the dialog, right? Well, that's not very helpful. because the dialog is in front of me, but yet the tab is behind the dialog, so I can't interact with John right now. I'm a little bit lost. So how do I get there? Well, I hold tab for a while until it finally gets through, or I do spatial navigation and I get there. But really, why? Like, why are we doing it this way? So to contrast, right, when I was at Gmail and I had the dialog pop open, remember I just pressed tab a couple of times and got to the link that I can't actually use. But the focus was set into the dialog, so I could start tabbing inside of that dialog. So really important. GitHub is another one that you can actually see it's a lot more animated. Whoops. As I go through and tab, it's like, wow, look at that. All that happening behind the scenes. It's just, you know, I can go through the entire page and I'm not anywhere near the dialog. So that's kind of important, right? That when you have a dialog, you want to set focus into that dialog so that people who are using keyboards can continue to navigate. So some things to keep in mind, just set focus to that dialog element when it's displayed. Right? You can set focus to the dialog itself. Even better, you can set focus to an element inside of the dialog that you're expecting people to interact with. Right? Just set focus to where people are going to be using your application. Really important. And if you need to, you can use that tab index and focus in order to do that. Another thing to do is remember where the focus was before the dialog was opened and set the focus back to that same element when the dialog is closed. And so I showed you how to do that earlier as well, right, with document.activeElement. So before you open up the dialog, you use document.activeElement to retrieve that element that has focus. You show the dialog, and then when the dialog goes away, you just set focus back to that element. It's pretty easy. It's 2 additional lines of code on top of what you've done already. And then please, 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 pressing escape should hide the dialog. Don't make me tab all the way through to some close or OK or cancel or something like that. Just pressing escape should make the dialog go away. Now, all the dialogs that I showed you to this point on Gmail, on Twitter, on GitHub, they all go away when you press escape. And that's really important. It would be even better if they were all saving focus, but you know, if you can get 3 out of 4, that's not all that bad. And the last thing is, if possible, you want to keep focus inside of the dialog. Because what can happen? I can go into a dialog and start tabbing through and tab out the bottom of that dialog, and now I'm back into the regular page again. Right? And you don't want that, because then I'm lost again. And so keeping focus in the dialog is really important. And so this is just a little bit of code that can help you do that. What you basically do is listen for focus at the document level. Now, since focus doesn't bubble, I'm listening for it during the capturing phase, so as it's coming down the document. And all you do is check to see if the element that is getting focus, event.target, is contained within the dialog. And so you have this dialog represented maybe by a div, and you've stored a reference to that in a variable called dialog node. And all you need to do is say, if not dialog node.contains event.target, then stop all that from happening and just set focus back to the dialog. Right? Basically, you want it to loop around as you're setting focus to things, going down the dialog. If it comes out the bottom, it starts back up at the top. And so, again, not that many lines of code to accomplish something that's really a boon for accessibility. So if you're thinking about doing keyboard shortcuts, then definitely think about having that question mark bring up the dialog that shows the keyboard shortcuts. Everybody's doing it. Don't be the only kid that didn't jump off the bridge. Make use of the common keyboard shortcuts where possible, especially with lists as you're navigating through lists. J and K, my two favorite keys on the keyboard. Use the convention of G followed by another letter to navigate to different sections. It's really cool. And you can use single letters for common actions. And I'll show you some examples of that too in a second. And make sure that you're shifting focus appropriately with those keyboard actions. Right, so as you're moving around, as you're saying J and K and moving through lists, make sure that the focus is moving with that. Because again, like if I'm doing those keyboard shortcuts, I'm going to move back and forth between those and hitting Enter and Tab a lot. So Google is actually really easy to use if you're only a keyboard user. First thing right off the bat, focus is set to the search box. Because why am I going to google.com? Probably to search, right? So that's pretty cool. But let's just say I don't feel like searching today for some reason. I start tabbing through. So I get the Google search button highlighted, which is really cool. And then I'm feeling lucky. Whoa! What happened? Bam! So what's actually happening is that this is what happens when you hover over that button, but they're also doing it on focus, right? Pretty cool. So 2 thumbs up for that. One more time. So let's just say that we're actually going to do a search now. And for fun, we'll see what's up with me. So I didn't realize that would actually show my email address, so whatever. When I press Tab, it goes, you see that little arrow that appeared in the corner? So that's actually showing you where the focus is at that point. And once I see that arrow, I can actually just use up and down and go all the way down to next at the very bottom. Right? So focus, 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 focus. Right? Pretty cool, just with the up and down arrow. Now I can also, on each of these, go in and tab as well and keep going down if that's what I want to do. Or I can just go back to using the up and down keys. So it's very cool. But I have a problem, is that I am constantly refining my search queries because I put in such lousy ones to start. And I sat there one day and I was like, all right, so I've just tapped to the bottom and I want to modify my query. If I was using a mouse, I would scroll back up to the top and I would click back in the query, but I don't have a mouse, so how am I going to do that? Well, it turns out all you have to do is just start typing. And it goes back up to the top. You can see no results for that. No. So it doesn't matter where the focus is. As long as you just keep typing, it'll always go back to the top, which is really useful. There's 43,000 results for that search query.